Now on to the 2027 budget. We started with such high hopes. Brand new governor who came in talking the tough talk. She opened encouragingly by confirming Republican contentions denied by the former administration that our structural deficit was much higher than the previous administration would ever admit, twice as high in fact. She opened by agreeing with Republicans, progressives in her own party and the press, and pretty much everyone in New Jersey except the previous administration and those running the legislative budget process, that the process sucked. Major funding and budget decisions were made in back rooms at the last minute and mostly rushed at the end of the budget's deadline and passed by votes of people who didn't have time to actually read and understand and explain to their constituents what was in it. She vowed to end this opacity and bring total transparency to the process. She opened by saying that the years-long period of prolific pork where pet projects of the powerful were foisted on the backs of taxpayers were over. She opened by saying affordability, making it cheaper to live and do business in New Jersey, was her top priority, along with transparency. I praised her at the time for being honest and recognizing these things and committing to correcting them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. In one fell swoop, all that rhetoric, all those promises, commitments are spectacularly set on fire. Taking them one at a time. On transparency. Let's admit it, folks. This is comical. One need look no further than the calendar and the clock and the frenzied activity over the last 48 hours. We didn't see a budget earlier than most years this year. We saw it later. We saw parts of it in the Budget Committee 20 minutes before we had to vote on it at a meeting that we had to desperately adjourn just before midnight so we didn't cause a government shutdown. And here we are, less than 48 hours after that. Every single person in this room will vote on a budget. Not one of us fully knows what's in it. Transparency, transparency. Now let's talk about the period of prolific pork that the governor pledged to end. So important, she mentioned in her budget address. Incredibly, this budget is just like the last 8 years. I mean, identical. The governor's pledge didn't make a dent. We see hundreds of millions of dollars and scores of line items, both crammed into this budget and in the supplemental budget of pet projects in towns and counties and school districts of the powerful. And a neat trick tying the transparency failure to the failed pork process. No explanation or justification of the worthiness of these line items. No idea who advocated for them or why they're justified and why New Jersey taxpayers should be footing the bill for pet projects in towns and counties of the powerful, while the vast majority of the towns of the taxpayers footing the bill get butt kiss, or even worse, get their municipal and school aid cut to pay for the powerful pet pork projects. Folks in Rutherford need a $1.2 million park? You got it. Folks in Linden and West New York's municipal budgets running a little short, over $2 million each. No problem. State taxpayers got your back. Hamilton need a $1 million fire truck. Voila. Lawrence Township Community Center need a $2 million spruce up. Done. Jersey City need $120 million, the largest giveaway to any municipality in the history of the state, because of its own ongoing fiscal mismanagement. Congratulations, Jersey City. You won the taxpayer-funded lottery. There are hundreds of these line items, totaling hundreds of millions of state taxpayer dollars, virtually all the result of backroom manipulations of the powerful. And the 8.5 million New Jersey taxpayers that get no benefit from this pork, well, after you get done paying for this largesse, you get to pay for your own parks and fire engines and community centers and operating expenses with no help from the state. Strike up the band, the pork parade marches on. Maybe the worst thing in all this is that all of this pork prioritized over fully funding our school funding formula, giving property tax relief. Your property taxes go up, New Jersey taxpayers. The quality of the kids' education goes down so that the powerful can fund their parochial pet projects. And the governor went along with it all. If that doesn't outrage New Jersey taxpayers, nothing ever will. To be clear, because I know the accusation is coming, Republicans don't suggest all add-ons via the 26 supplemental or in the 2027 budget are pork. Domestic violence services, service for the developmentally disabled, broad-based health services, property tax relief, school funding. Republicans totally on board. The line is clear. So please, my friends on the other side of the aisle, strike that line of attack from your talking points. Affordability. We heard that word out of the governor's mouth on the campaign trail, maybe more than we heard the word Trump. One would think that that would lead to proposing a budget that was less, or at the very least on par, with the record-setting bloated budget of Governor Murphy. But no, it was $2 billion more than the 2026 budget. That's not an encouraging sign of slashing costs. And new higher taxes, over $1.3 billion more. But don't worry, we're told, they'll fall on businesses. Don't you buy it. Businesses don't pay taxes. They pass those costs on to every single one of us in increased costs and costs of goods and services. More troubling, even with the massive spending and tax increases, the governor bizarrely cut essential, non-controversial spending for higher education, people suffering from serious diseases such as Tourette's, ALS, diabetes, and cancer, and arbitrarily cut or froze school funding for hundreds of beleaguered school districts. But hey, we're told, she'll hold the line on additions. I'm sorry, but holding the line after you've increased spending by $2 billion is a horse has left the barn scenario if ever there was one. So no extra credit there, even if the mission were accomplished. And except for the tortured misrepresentations from the governor and here in this chamber, the mission hasn't been accomplished. There are hundreds of millions, if not more than $1 billion in below-the-line expenditures, phony cuts, and COVID money offsets of ongoing expenditures that will surface as the fiscal year progresses. Additionally, there are hundreds of millions of dollars in expenses shifted back into the 26 budget that really belong in this one. So no, even the low aspiration to hold the line at the $2 billion spending increase was a failure. Lastly, adjacent to that failure to hold the line on spending is our structural deficit, supposedly cut in half to $1.5 billion. But the same below-the-line spending, the same COVID money manipulation, and the same obscuring of promises that were made in back rooms. Or I bet you, when all is said and done, as Republicans predicted last year, and this governor ultimately agreed with us, I bet you our structural deficit ends up at the same $3 billion. This budget fails in the categories the governor herself rightly laid out: affordability, transparency, pork, taxes, general gross unfairness. It fails by any objective measure of success. It fails the people of New Jersey who are starving for someone to hear their pleas for relief and honesty, and it's not a good sign of things to come. For all these reasons, I'll be voting no on this budget. So should everyone else in this room. Now, we know that the majority is not going to fundamentally rewrite the budget at this late hour, but my colleagues and I have placed on your desk a simple amendment that cancels more than $300 million of money flowing to unexplained pork projects and redirects that money to actual priorities: fair school funding and restoring funds for certain nonprofit service providers who care for the least fortunate amongst us. More specifically, it cancels $163 million of old pork balances from prior budgets that have been sitting around unspent in state accounts for up to 5 years, sitting there wasted, and eliminates about 115 new or repeated line items of pork jammed in the budget before us based on naked favoritism. It redirects nearly $500 million of savings to a special account called, appropriately, Fairness and Compassion Over Pork Fund. The fund would be restricted for later appropriations for two purposes. First, it would better support schools and property taxpayers by fully funding the statutory school aid increases being denied to about 100 school districts and more fully covering the cost of special education for every district. Second, it would restore funding to social services providers whose support is being cut in this budget. Imagine that. This amendment would actually put schools and service providers and property tax relief ahead of pork. The old pork balances we proposed to redirect went to things that were never explained, but were later learned to be for things like tiki bars, indoor pickleball courts, luxury boxes at sports stadiums, and even pet projects in wealthy communities like Princeton and Montclair. Instead of pretending to care about schools and compassionate pork, we actually could. So let's see where every member stands today. Do you put pork out of your own schools and critical service providers, or will you side with Republicans and fix this broken budget, or at least take a half step towards doing so? Mr. President, pursuant to Senate Rule 17:2, I move that Senate Bill 2027 be placed on second reading for the purposes of amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.